Welcome to this episode of the story. Have you subscribed yet? Chapter 134, Attempts to Break Through the Weak Point. The noisy sounds of the spirit balancers outside the cave grew closer, and the expressions of Sumo, his grandfather, and the old man Lin Yuan grew increasingly grave. Sumo knew well that they had little time left to devise a strategy. They must quickly launch an attack on the weak point of the spirit balancer's spiritual energy Feng Suo Quan to have a glimmer of hope. Sumo took a deep breath, slowly circulating the remaining spiritual energy in his body. The time-reversing spiritual energy intertwined with the mysterious power flowing through his meridians. He concentrated his mind, constantly simulating the optimal timing and method for the attack in his head. The old man Lin Yuan stood aside, watching Sumo with intense eyes, seemingly evaluating his strength and the feasibility of their upcoming action. "Child, if you can combine time-reversing spiritual energy with spatial spiritual energy at this moment, it might catch them off guard and turn the tide," Lin Yuan whispered. His voice was soft but guai clear in the tense atmosphere. Sumo nodded slightly. He recalled the method of combination hinted at by the runes on the mysterious stone tablet and tried to guide his time-reversing spiritual energy to resonate with the surrounding space. However, perfectly merging the two types of spiritual energy was no easy task. Sumo could feel a slight repulsion when his time-reversing spiritual energy tried to make contact with the spatial spiritual energy. Don't rush. Try slowing down the rhythm of your spiritual energy and guide their fusion in a gentler way. Lin Yun noticed Sumo's predicament and offered guidance. Sumo followed his advice, slowing the flow of his spiritual energy and infiltrating the surrounding space with his time-reversing spiritual energy in a delicate manner. Gradually, he felt the repulsion between the time-reversing and spatial spiritual energy diminish, and a faint connection quietly formed between them. At this point, the footsteps of the spirit balancers outside the cave were clearly audible, and their conversations drifted in. "Leader, they must be nearby, maybe even hiding in this cave," one of the spirit balancers said. "Search every corner. Don't miss a thing." The cold voice of the spirit balancer leader rang out. Sumo knew he couldn't wait any longer. He quickly sought in the weak point of the spirit balancer's spiritual energy Feng Suo Quan and condensed his time-reversing spiritual energy fused with some spatial spiritual energy into a sharp, time-reversed spatial blade. This spiritual blade shimmered with colorful light, and the space around its edge twisted slightly as if it would tear apart at any moment. His grandfather, standing by, was also ready. He gathered his remaining spiritual energy at the tip of his staff, forming a blazing spiritual energy orb, prepared to coordinate with Sumo's attack. The moment the spirit balancer stepped into the cave, Sumo dashed toward the entrance, stabbing the time-reversed spatial blade fiercely at the weak point of the spiritual energy Feng Suo Quan. At the same time, his grandfather threw the spiritual energy orb, which, glowing with intense heat, followed closely behind the time-reversed spatial blade. The time-reversed spatial blade struck the weak point first, instantly erupting with powerful force, causing the spiritual energy fluctuations at the weak point to become disordered. Immediately after, the spiritual energy orb also hit the same spot with a loud boom, shining brightly and shaking the entire cave. The spirit balancers were caught off guard by this sudden attack, and a visible crack appeared in their spiritual energy Feng Suo Quan under the double strike. However, the spirit balancers were no ordinary opponents. They quickly reacted, each deploying their spiritual energy in an attempt to repair the crack in the Feng Suo Quan. Seeing this, Sumo launched another attack. He unleashed the time-reversed spatial storm, with himself as the center, where time-reversing spiritual energy and spatial spiritual energy formed a powerful storm that swept toward the spirit balancers. Wherever the storm passed, the space seemed to twist into a mahua, and the bodies of the spirit balancers wobbled unsteadily in the storm. His grandfather also waved his staff, unleashing spirit thunder rending the sky. Dark clouds instantly gathered in the sky, and thick bolts of lightning struck down from the clouds, accurately hitting the spirit balancers. The spirit balancer leader's face turned ashen. He hadn't expected Sumo to launch such a fierce attack in such a predicament. "Everyone, hold your ground, don't panic. Gather your spiritual energy and first fend off their attacks," the leader shouted loudly. Under the leader's command, the spirit balancers quickly formed a defensive formation. They pooled their spiritual energy to create a solid spiritual energy shield, blocking the attacks from Sumo and his grandfather. For a moment, the cave was filled with the shimmer of spiritual energy, and the roar of various spells was deafening. Although Sumo and his grandfather's attacks were fierce, the Spirit Balancer's defense was also solid, and the two sides fell into a stalemate. Sumo knew that this couldn't go on. He had to find the next flaw in the Spirit Balancer's defense to deliver a fatal blow. So, while maintaining the time-reverse spatial storm, he carefully observed the flow of the Spirit Balancer's defensive spiritual energy. In a fierce confrontation, Sumo noticed that when the Spirit Balancers maintained their shield, their defense at the top was slightly weaker in order to resist the lightning attacks. Sumo's heart skipped a beat. He quickly adjusted the direction of his attack, focusing the power of the time-reverse spatial storm on the top of the Spirit Balancer's shield. "Grandfather, attack the top of their shield," Sumo shouted. His grandfather immediately understood, gathering all his remaining spiritual energy into a spirit flame breaking top strike and shooting it toward the top of the shield. The Spirit Balancers noticed Sumo and his grandfather's intention and tried to strengthen the top defense, but it was too late. The time-reverse spatial storm and spirit flame-breaking top strike hit the top of the shield one after another, and the powerful force instantly broke through the Spirit Balancer's defense. The shield shattered, its light faded, and the Spirit Balancers were thrown backward by the powerful impact, falling all over the cave. Sumo and his grandfather took the opportunity to rush out of the cave, knowing that this was their best chance to escape. Watching Sumo and his grandfather flee, the Spirit Balancer leader's eyes shone a trace of unwillingness and anger. "Chase them! We must not let them get away!" The leader struggled to his feet and led the injured Spirit Balancers in pursuit of Sumo and his grandfather. Sumo and his grandfather ran beaming through the forest, knowing that the Spirit Balancers would not let them go easily. And who knew how many other dangers were hidden in this mysterious forest? Could they successfully shake off the Spirit Balancer's pursuit? What new crises would they encounter in the forest? Everything was unknown, making one anxious for their fate. Sumo kept an eye on the Spirit Balancers behind them as he ran, while also being wary of possible dangers in the forest. Suddenly, a turbulent river appeared ahead, its waters roaring and blocking their path. Sumo and his grandfather stopped, looking at the river in front of them, feeling a little anxious. At this time, the shouts of the Spirit Balancers grew closer, and they had no time to look for another way out. "Xiaomu, what should we do?" His grandfather looked at Sumo, a trace of worry in his eyes. Sumo quickly observed the river. He found that although the river was turbulent, there was a huge rock exposed above the water not far away. An idea came to Sumo. "Grandfather, I'll use my time-reversing spiritual energy to temporarily slow down the flow of the river. You take the chance to jump to that rock, and then I'll find a way to cross," Sumo said. His grandfather nodded slightly, trusting Sumo's judgment. Sumo took a deep breath and unleashed the time-reverse flow slowing technique, directing his time-reversing spiritual energy toward the river in an attempt to slow its current. However, this river seemed to contain some special spiritual energy. Sumo's time-reversing spiritual energy could only slightly slow the river's flow, not achieving the effect he had expected. "There's no time, grandfather. Jump first!" Sumo shouted. His grandfather didn't hesitate. He conjured the moment and used his spiritual energy to jump toward the rock. Just as his grandfather was about to land on the rock, a huge water python suddenly swam out of the river. The python opened its huge mouth and beat toward his grandfather. His grandfather's face changed drastically. He quickly waved his staff, unleashing Spirit Flame Impact in an attempt to repel the python. The Spirit Flame Impact hit the water python, but the python's body was extremely tough. It only paused slightly before continuing to bite at his grandfather. Seeing this, Sumo was burning with anxiety. He quickly unleashed Time Reverse Spatial Piercing, a spike containing time-reversing and spatial spiritual energy shooting toward the water python. Feeling this powerful force, the water python had to give up attacking his grandfather and turn to dodge. Sumo took the opportunity to jump onto the rock and join his grandfather. "Grandfather, are you okay?" Sumo asked with concern. "I'm fine, Xiaomu. This water python is no easy opponent. We must be careful," his grandfather said. At this time, the Spirit Balancers had already chased to the riverbank. When they saw Sumo and his grandfather trapped on a rock in the river, dewy smiles appeared on their faces. "Sumo, this time you can't escape even with wings," the Spirit Balancer leader shouted. Sumo and his grandfather looked at the Spirit Balancers, knowing that they had fallen into a new predicament. With powerful spirit balancers on one side and a ferocious water python on the other, how would they break out? How would this crisis be resolved? Everything was still unknown, and a tense atmosphere once again enveloped them. The story continues, with more excitement to come. Subscribe soon!